Okay, I think we are slowly starting to get ready to kick things off. Warm welcome everyone to our event jointly organized by UN Global Compact Network Finland and Sweden, where we will discuss best practices on how to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals in your business in practice. My name is Bettina Niiranen. I'm from UN Global Compact Network Finland, and I will be your host today, along with my colleague Magnus Mellgren from Global Compact Network in Sweden. Before we begin with the program, a few housekeeping rules for you to consider. Please keep your microphone and camera turned off throughout this session. You will be able to communicate with other participants and ask questions from the speakers through the Zoom chat. And this session will be recorded, and participants will access the recording and materials presented afterwards. And we, of course, want to continue to improve our event, so please consider giving us feedback on the event by filling out a feedback form that you will receive to your email after this session. But let's get going. To give everyone a little bit of context, we are the United Nations Global Compact, which is the UN Secretary General's special initiative to advance corporate sustainability everywhere in the world. The UN Global Compact today is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, as more than 16,000 companies across the world have committed to the initiative, thus connecting over 80 million employees to our core principles of responsible business conduct in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And the UN Global Compact operates globally through 69 local networks around the world, including in Finland and in Sweden, with a mission to strengthen the local presence of the initiative and make our principles, our guidance tools, and support an integral part of company sustainability work in each country. So as a global corporate sustainability initiative and part of the UN family, we call on companies to raise ambition by first ensuring responsible business conduct by aligning company operations with our 10 core principles, and then finding opportunities to create impact through the UN Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. And we call this formula the principles-based approach to the SDGs. So to break it down a little bit more for you, in practice, the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact provide companies with the framework to understand how to operate in society. So this is the foundation for corporate sustainability. And the SDGs, on the other hand, present an unprecedented opportunity for business to contribute to the global development agenda and tap into new market opportunities. So the global goals are an ambitious vision of what companies' activities should work to achieve. But of course, there is a risk that good intentions could cause more harm than good if company doesn't have their foundation for responsibility in place. So if a company really wants to create long-lasting positive impact on the SDGs, it must adopt a principles-based approach and always consider its impacts across human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption first and foremost. And this will help us see the full range of companies' impacts, both positive and negative. And of course, from a business perspective, this will help companies prioritize action, be more strategic, reduce risk, nurture innovation, and new business opportunities that are actually aligned with societal needs. And today we will hear all about the best ways on how to actually do this in practice. So on the agenda today, we will first hear a keynote from Caitlin Casey, who is a senior manager at the United Nations Global Compact, where she will put the SDGs in a business context and highlight key practical steps for companies to approach the SDGs in a meaningful and impactful way. A keynote from business designer Susanna Fräki from Accenture Song will then highlight how the principles of design thinking can help companies take a practical yet holistic approach when addressing complex sustainability issues. And finally, we will hear from Fiskars Group Sustainability Manager, Juulia Rantala, about Fiskars Group's journey to advance the SDGs in their operations. And after the presentations, we will answer your questions in a panel-style Q&A. And as the last thing, we will use a moment to provide information about the SDG Ambition Accelerator, which is the UN Global Compact's capacity building program to support companies in advancing SDGs in practice. But now this is all for me at this stage. Without further ado, I will give the floor to our keynote speaker, Caitlin. Over to you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning from New York. I'm so excited to be with you today. Thanks so much to the networks of Finland and Sweden for inviting me. Yes, my name is Caitlin Casey. I've worked at the Global Compact for the last 9 years, and for the last, since 2015, really, have been really closely involved leading a lot of our work on the ways that business can and must really support the SDGs in this principled way that Bettina was describing. So what I will do for us to start off today's session is talk a little bit about the way that business, as we know, has a really critical role to play in advancing the SDGs through their core business practice and sort of the ambition that we hope and expect business to have as they do so. Next slide, please. As we look at the magnitude of the challenges that we're facing today, as a world, I think they can sometimes feel quite intractable and complex and difficult to understand where to dig in. You know, some of the most common examples that we start to see are thinking about, for example, the deep interconnections between climate change and poverty and inequality with, for example, you know, growing climate refugees, leading to increased poverty as those vulnerable populations move to new places, and creating that really unequal society. You very quickly, if we put a lens of the SDGs on there, begin to see how the SDGs become a framework for us to understand and think about ways that we can take action towards those, because we see goal 13 as a very key way to understand climate action. The SDG 1 around zero poverty sort of stands as the bedrock of the SDGs in many ways, and then goals like goal 10 and goal 8 around reducing inequalities are really important for us to be sure that we're balancing always in mind the needs of people and planet together as one. You know, that's just one example. I think we see so many other examples of the ways that something like clean water and health are deeply tied together, along with access to food. So it's what's important about this as we think about it is that any action that anyone is taking towards one SDG is going to have knock-on effects towards the others, whether that's positive, because as we address, for example, our climate action, or my favorite example, gender equality is sort of what can lift the rising tide that lifts all boats. There are some where we're going to have really positive impacts by tackling one SDG towards the others if we do so in an intentional way. But then others where it's really important that we think about the potential negative impacts that we can have because of those deep interconnections. What we know, though, again, is that it sometimes can feel a little bit overwhelming to zoom out and see a world with war and famine and drought. Just in the US, I'm here in the US, California, our largest economy, was without power for much of the day or much of the night last night in a heat wave connected to lack of access to clean and sustainable energy because of climate change just overloaded the power grid. So things like that, where we see these ever increasing moments, are a bit worrying, and why it's so important for business to take action on these really critical interconnected SDGs, given the framework that they provide for us. When we think, if we could go to the next slide, excuse me. So given the scope of those challenges, we do really hope to see business taking action that's sufficiently ambitious that it's going to meet those societal needs. What we know right now about the average company taking action towards the SDGs is, well, for one, the average company is likely not. The average company in the global that participates in the global compact already is, right? For the very most part, you are understanding the SDGs and beginning to take action, which is really exciting to see. However, there's a gap right now between the goals and actions that companies are currently taking versus that high level of societal need for people and planet to meet those significant complex challenges like climate change, poverty, the ever widening gender gap. So what we hope to do and to think very critically about is find ways to help business bridge that gap between those societal needs and where we are today. That's what we're really going to start to dig into. On the next slide, this is my sort of North Star throughout all of this work, is this quote from the Secretary General, where he is calling on business and really highlighting the role of business to take action on the SDGs by going deeper, faster, and more ambitious in order to unleash the societal and economic transformation needed. I love this quote, and it is something I hold on tightly to as our inspiration to be sure that we are always being ambitious in the strategies and objectives that we are holding on to be motivated to think very deeply about the ways that our core business practices should embed action towards the SDGs and our sustainable development agenda in them, and then trying to find ways to accelerate that progress. The other thing that it makes me hold on to is the idea that all companies everywhere, no matter their size, their sector, or their geography, have a really important role to play. I think that's a really common question we get. You know, it's easy to see for the largest companies where their impacts are, and what can be harder is, you know, if you're a small service provider or financial service company, is there a role for you to play? And I think the answer is always going to be yes, because there are going to be opportunities as you think through the way your core business can be leveraged that can make progress towards that acceleration of change based on a grounding in the 10 principles and that principles-based approach. I'll go to the next slide. So when we think, I think still it's a lot, 17 goals, which even in themselves are just one. I always think, like, we have 17 goals, but we could have had 20, we could have had 100. They're just one way to sort of slice the pizza of what it could have been in terms of the magnitude of the challenges that we're facing. That can sometimes be overwhelming, and it can be hard to know where to get started. So this is why we really put forward this 5-step approach for how to take action on the SDGs. First, of course, is understanding what they are. We won't spend time on this today. I think if you're likely here, you probably already do know about them and are ready to dig into it. So the 3 key steps that are at the heart of action towards the SDGs are prioritization, making ambitious goal setting, and then that integration into your core business practice. We're going to go into each of these in more detail, but just to say that this is then where we think you should really focus those efforts, is on those 3 steps. And then the reporting piece is also very important. but that's the output that comes from those actions that you took in steps 2, 3, and 4. So we wanted to just highlight that the Global Compact has a number of tools and resources around both prioritizing, goal setting, and integration, including the SDG Compass, the blueprint for SDG leadership, the practical guide for SDG reporting. Those are 3 really important ones that will dig into this, but I'll just give you a flavor of what we are looking at for each of those steps now. Let's turn first to prioritization. This is one, I think that if we think back to 2015 and 2016, this was the biggest question, and it honestly is still the most common question that we get from most companies, which is to say, where do I start and how do I know what I should be working on? Should my company be working on all 17 SDGs? Should I pick only a couple? How do we make sense of that? And the answer for me always, in terms of from a very practical standpoint, is to undertake a process of principled prioritization of the SDGs, which is a process to identify which of those SDGs are likely going to be a priority focus for your company, based on, first, the opportunities to minimize your negative impact, and then second, those opportunities to maximize your positive impact. So I think that's a really important step for any companies to be sure they're moving away from cherry picking or SDG washing, is to first ensure that you have identified those potential most severe negative impacts on people and the planet that you either already have or that you could have in the future, both in your own operations and then down your value chain or your supply chain. So doing that assessment will ensure that you are really able to focus on those areas where you can mitigate the negative impact already now. My colleagues in the human rights space, what they always say is that if companies were just working to minimize their negative impact, we practically would already have achieved the SDGs, which I think is a little bit of an exaggeration given the complexity of those challenges we talked about, but it does just really highlight the importance of not ignoring those negative impacts in favor of what can sometimes seem more exciting or you know, perhaps be perceived as more business oriented around the potential positive impacts, which are also, of course, really key. What are those areas where your business, through its core practices, are well positioned to either make investments, change your practices that can very positively impact the SDGs? And that's when we start to see some exciting things around technology investment or different ways to accelerate the pace of change. But in both of these cases, doing so through your core business is the really, really key step, and something that I think is a place for companies to invest. So if you've done the process of principled prioritization, you may come out with, you know, one SDG that is really the place to focus. Maybe there's 5, maybe there are more than that, but you can feel very confident as you move forward into the next step of goal setting that you are working on the right things. In goal setting, the really important thing to consider here is that the prevailing practice for most companies to date is, of course, to have your ESG targets or your ESG goals around, for example, emissions reductions, water use reductions. You know exactly what I mean, but the gap that we have seen is, for most companies, what they've been doing for goal setting is taking their existing sustainability targets and tagging them to the related SDG. So for example, you take your emissions, percent of CO2 reduced by dollar of revenue would be a really common KPI. And you think about it in a way that's very incremental, instead of zooming out and trying to consider sort of the absolute goals that are grounded in science and reflect what is required by every company in the world based on their carbon usage to actually meet, for example, the needs for a 1.5 degree temperature rise. So that is where we're seeing a shift in terms of expectations for goal setting from being incremental, output oriented, very focused on potentially philanthropic efforts or your own direct operations. What we'd like to see in the future are goals that are more grounded in societal need and based on that science, so more ambitious. We want to see more impact-oriented goals that reflect change outside of the company's operations and services. And I think it's okay to look at the ways that the different KPIs can be very interconnected across an enterprise and really see those connections and the way that they can have those knock-on effects. So that's where we want to work also to really ensure that goals that we're setting are sufficiently ambitious to bridge that performance gap that we talked about before and prepare to meet the SDGs. The final step then, based on that, is the critical need to, I should say first, in order to help companies understand what that level of ambition really is, we work to create the SDG ambition benchmarks. This is not a final list. We started with 10. We will hopefully very soon have a couple more to come out. But what we try to say is that these represent the line in the sand where we know what it takes for us to sort of meet that SDG and what ambitious action by a company really looks like. So these are sort of available. We have guides on each of them in terms of what good KPIs can look like that would help you identify how to set this up for yourself. Yes, let's look now at the integration. Because I think then this is the critical component. We've seen it so often. Professionals in the sustainability department or the ESG work do a really great job of identifying the opportunity for the company to have significant impact. They know where those opportunities are, but then reach internal barriers or have a difficult time actually embedding action towards those goals through the entire company, So we've put forward what we call the SDG ambition approach, which is our effort to identify the 8 steps a company can take in order to deeply integrate their goals across their core business practice. So it starts, of course, first with the priorities, the goal setting, and then identifying those pathways. What are the places within your business where you can, across the entire value chain, where you are set up to be driving action towards that goal? And then what we want to start to see is creating different performance metrics, identifying the business processes, and then the system opportunities and technologies that are available across the enterprise in order to mobilize different functions in the ways that are needed to together work to meet that goal. Let's show this on the next slide, which demonstrates a bit the way that we know different business units are well positioned and really required in order to support different goals. We know, depending on what you're working on, all of these functions may not be relevant, but certainly no matter what, some of them are going to be needed to achieve whatever you're working towards. So first and most critically, of course, is ensuring that that level of ambition and the buy-in for it is anchored at the highest executive level, of course, through the board and executive C-suite. So can it be written into even your business purpose, your governance structures, and then of course your corporate strategy and goals. From there, we want to also look through your operations, your products and services, the way that you have people management, remuneration, your finance teams, the way that you're making investment decisions. And then finally, how do you engage also your stakeholders and ensure that sales and marketing, you're engaging in partnerships, and that you're effectively communicating these stories are really deeply embedded. When all of these pieces are working together on those clearly defined, ambitious goals with your KPIs, your pathways defined, we hope that we'll begin to see really significant progress and see that acceleration of progress that the Secretary General calls for. We do, as I said, have a number of tools that we hope, we don't just say this in 20 minutes, it sounds, I don't want to make it seem like I think it's easy. We know it's not, but we do want to support companies as much as possible. So excited that we've developed things like the SDG Ambition Accelerator, which I know you'll hear about later, but that is really focused exactly on these 3 steps of prioritizing, goal setting, and integration. So we're here to stand by your side, challenge you, support you, and together hopefully work to set those ambitious goals and make serious progress. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. Thank you so much for your insightful keynote. Really interesting to hear about how the UN Global Compact guides businesses in taking action through prioritization, goal setting, and integration. And like Caitlin mentioned, we will tell a bit more about our capacity building program that focuses exactly on these steps later on in the event. But now we will give the floor to our next keynote speaker, Susanna Fräki from Accenture Song. I will give the floor to you. She will be talking about design thinking and sustainability. Over to you, Susanna.
Good, thank you. Can you see my screen well?
Yes, looks perfect.
Thank you. And thank you, Caitlin, for the very interesting talk, and a big thank you to Bettina and Magnus for organizing this. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this. So I am here to talk about design thinking and sustainability. So sustainability issues are highly motivational and emotional for me, and I bet most of you as well, since you are here, but I might start with presenting myself first. So I am a privileged Finn living in Helsinki with a blended family with kids aged 7, 17, and 19. And actually the 19-year-old just rented her own first flat, which is very exciting for us. And if I say privileged, this is because our society provides monetary support for education for adults, and therefore I could take a few years off my 9-to-5 job and focus on acquiring a master's degree in creative sustainability from Aalto University before starting as a business designer and a sustainability lead in Song, Helsinki. And both separately and combined, sustainability and design mean a lot to me. I can call myself a sensible person, and I trust science-based research on climate change and circumstances following pollution and the overuse of Earth's finite resources. So design can be a very powerful tool to create that change and impact. And it has been even estimated that over 80% of all product-related environmental impacts are determined during the design phase of a product. So this estimation has been done by the Science Hub at the European Commission. But let's kick off with talking about the Sustainable Development Goals and design. And just as Caitlin was talking, I am talking about the interconnectedness. So when we design solutions with one particular goal in mind, for example, responsible consumption and production, the gains are spread across many other goals as well. And in order to tackle the complex problems of sustainability, the design solutions must be effective and desirable as well. The service or particular product should be designed in a participatory and user-centric way to achieve the desired effect. So applying to all areas of design, focusing on the end user's needs can bring benefits to the consumer products, industrial processes, and government programs, and more. And in this presentation, I will look at the design that contributes to SDG 12, or the products and services that Caitlin was talking about just now. And as we know, this SDG 12 focuses on ensuring sustainable consumption and product patterns with targets aiming to reduce waste and pollution. And as we know, this SDG is guiding us to solve the problem of most of our products not being designed for recycling. So, for example, you might have heard that only 9% of plastic waste has ever been recycled. And this was quite astonishing for me to hear, even though I thought we were a bit further along. Many items simply don't meet the needs or the business case for recycling. So we might ask, how can we better design our products to be less resource intensive, easily reusable, and 100% recyclable? And the answer, I think the answer is only if they are sustainable by design. So it's obvious that when designing for the SDGs, we need to think about the stakeholders and their needs, and therefore it's good to bring in design thinking. So let's start by asking the question, what is design thinking? So design thinking is collaborative. People with diverse perspectives work together, creating multidisciplinary teams and encouraging different viewpoints and client co-creation. And design thinking is human-centered, always starting with empathy and understanding people, our clients, customers, and users through research. And design thinking is prototype-driven. So creating concrete examples and representations of the designed product or service allows early feedback and saves time and resources further on. The design thinking process can be applied to solve problems when developing solutions fulfilling the end user's needs, and it can be built out of 5 phases. So everything starts with empathy. Empathy is to learn about the audience from whom you are designing through interviews and observation. So who is my user and what is important to this person? Then define, create a viewpoint or point of view, what is based on users' needs and insights. So what are these, the user's needs, and understand what are their pain points. And after that, ideate. So brainstorm and come up with many creative solutions as possible. For example, in a co-creational workshop where even wild ideas can be encouraged. And then prototype, build a representation of one or more ideas to show to others. So thinking about how can the idea be presented. And during this phase, the intention is to create only rough drafts. And then test. Share your idea with your original user group for feedback. What worked or what didn't work. So where we are now, the customer centricity is falling short, and we need to move beyond being 100% focused on the customer's individual needs and wants if we want to advance the goals of sustainability. So we need to see and treat the customers beyond consumption, and we need to be relevant to external life forces, and we need to adapt and provide new value. For example, is convenience, which is served good for the planet. In other words, we need a mindset change in design, starting from product-centered design to the era we are now in, customer centricity, which is focusing on extreme convenience and entering a new way of designing for people and the planet, life-centered design. Let's talk start talking about each of these and what they mean. And as we discussed the SDG 12 in the beginning, we look at the approach through examples focusing on objects around us in our everyday life. Let's start with product-centered design. It means that the focus is on the product, its functions and performance, the user responses or actions to be able to use the product. And an organization focusing on product performance has all their strategies and business processes built around the product and works accordingly. So the Heinz bottle is a straightforward and very simple example of product versus customer centricity. Now, not at this point, not focusing on the recyclability of the materials, but focusing on the convenience. So some of us might remember using a knife to get some ketchup out of this iconic glass jar and ending up with everything covered in sweet red ketchup. At least I have a few times. But since then, the bottle has been evolving and serves a more convenient experience by turning it upside down to help consumers get the product quicker and with less mess at the bottle's opening. Moving forward to customer-centric design, which is the process of building your product or service based on your customers' wants and needs and challenges. But customer centricity was created for a more stable and static world where trends and events were moving at a slower pace, and consumers and organizations had more time to react and evolve. The singularly packed coffee capsules are an example of great convenience and a superior customer experience. And every cup is perfect in terms of grind and freshness. So what else can the customer ask for? Well, they might ask what are the negative consequences of the waste that this convenience has, and what is the big picture of these externalities. So an example of this externality can be seen in these bold numbers. So about 39,000 capsules are produced every minute globally, and up to 29,000 of these end up in landfill. So we can see that many of the brands on our shelves don't have real mission or in the world or a purpose. They don't stand for anything outside of profit. And we might even say that the capsule coffee is an environmental crisis. Also, human health issues have been discussed regarding to the aluminum. So from these devastating numbers, it's good to approach the principles of life-centered design. Now, life-centered design is a design philosophy and approach that goes beyond human needs to consider the needs of all entities, all people, all non-human, and all planet. And life-centric design should consider a wide range of stakeholders, and no one stakeholder group should be considered alone. For example, all people, so target users and non-users in touch with the product lifecycle, and invisible humans impacted by the design. All non-humans, from large animals to insects and microbes affected by the life cycle of the product, and all planet, vegetation and water systems and ecosystems which are affected. A life-centered way of thinking includes considering how the designed product or service exists in the system and understanding the synergies and benefits. In other words, we should consider designing our products and services to exist between the ecological ceiling and the social foundation, known also as the donut by Kate Raworth. When designing new things, we design for the future. We carry the responsibility for the effects of the product or service on the people and the planet through its whole life cycle. So for example, embedding a solution to dispose or repurpose an object should already be considered a part of its design. We need to consider the full picture and the system which is operated when making the object sustainable, and to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Even though life-centered design is an emerging design philosophy and approach, some fascinating examples have surfaced during the last years, which contribute to the goals of SDG 12 as well. An example of this is Gerrard Street, a fully modular headphone model, tackling the waste problem by offering a service of unlimited repairs. So the product can last even a lifetime, and that's quite long, I think. So when you break one part of the headphones, you can order a replacement and receive it through mail. And you can switch the part with your broken one and send it back. And they will repair and use the part again in a new set. This is an example of design and sustainability merging to create a product with a broader holistic view in the life cycle and a new approach for our everyday lives. It is up to our behavior to change, to embrace these new products and services. But again, there's a but. The reality is that we have a slight problem in this area. So although 65% of consumers say they want to buy sustainably and purpose-driven brands, only 26 actually do so. And this is from a Accenture research reality check from 2021. So for organizations working with the Sustainable Development Goals, design thinking and life-centered design can bring value by approaching problems from a new angle. And we know complex problems need thinking outside the box and creating desirable solutions. As an approach, life-centered design provides a more comprehensive and holistic view of the interdependencies involved when looking at the surrounding systems and embedding the emotional understanding of a wider range of stakeholders. When thinking about the organization's own processes, it can be an excellent way to build collaboration between often very siloed teams and productively share ideas and create innovative solutions. So it's quite evident that design has a real purpose and an opportunity to drive sustainable transitions and help organizations find new ways of meeting the user's needs and wants, and create desirable, sustainable experiences. And this is where I say thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Susanna. Really insightful. Really appreciate your insights on this design perspective for advancing the SDGs. And we really, I think for me at least, I really what was highlighted for me was the people planet approach that is at the core of design thinking, and that is also what Caitlin was highlighting as a critical step when planning strategic actions. So I encourage everyone here on the line to also consider how the design approach that Susanna was just telling about, how could that be used in your strategic processes to address sustainability issues, also in product design, but also in a wider sense in strategic processes. So thank you, Susanna. This was really insightful.
Thank you.
We will then go into the next item in the agenda. We will hear a practical company example from Fiskars Group, from Juulia Rantala, about how Fiskars has taken on the challenge to address SDGs in their business. So over to you, Juulia.
Thank you. Just a second and I'll share my slides. There we go. Can you see them okay?
Yes, we can see them perfect.
Excellent. Okay, hello everyone, and hi from my side as well. So my name is Juulia Rantala. I'm the Sustainability Manager at Fiskars Group, and I'm going to be talking about how we've taken action on the SDGs. But before diving into that, briefly a few words about Fiskars Group. So for us, pioneering design and premium design is something that is in the center of everything that we do. We're a global home of design-driven brands for indoor and outdoor living, and our product categories consist of tableware, gardening tools, and cooking products, for example. So we were already founded in 1649, and we are actually the oldest company still operating in Finland. But today we are quite a global company, and our brands are present in more than 100 countries. We have more than 350 of our own stores, and we employ almost 7,000 people across 30 countries. And here is our family of brands. And as you can also see from this list, our brands are also quite international nowadays. But then diving into the topic of today, so how we are addressing the SDGs at Fiskars Group. Here you can see the 3 SDGs that have been identified as most relevant for us at Fiskars Group. Back in 2019, when we were renewing our sustainability strategy and our long-term goals, we looked to the SDGs to kind of guide us in finding what we should really be focusing on. And our sustainability strategy and our commitments have actually been constructed around these 3 SDGs that we have found to be most relevant for our company. So how did we actually then come up with these 3 SDGs? So we did the prioritizing that Caitlin also talked about before. We started off with a preliminary assessment. So we used external tools and materials, including the SDG compass that Caitlin talked about. And we used these to dig deeper into each of the SDGs because we wanted to really understand what each of them entail before making any decisions. And then through internal discussions, we initially came up with this list of 8 SDGs that we found to be relevant for Fiskars Group. But then we did some further analysis still, and we came up with the 3 that you can see on this slide, because we realized that these were the ones that were relevant for us throughout our entire value chain. And as we conducted an impact assessment also in this process, we saw how each of these SDGs has a negative as well as positive impacts. The remaining 5 on the initial list of 8 SDGs that we identified, we keep the rest 5 kind of on a backlist because, as we all know, the world around us is changing all the time and businesses need to change with it. So we keep these 5 as a sort of list that we reflect on to see if something from there could become relevant or something to prioritize for us in the future. And we actually initiated our work around the SDGs as part of our materiality process. And this is actually a great tool for this kind of continuous reflection. So depending on your company, you might be conducting a materiality assessment every few years. As a part of this assessment, it's really good to reflect on whether you're focusing on the right things and also prioritizing the right SDGs. And this part of the process can already be extremely beneficial for companies. For us, for example, we were already during the prioritization process able to identify new potential business opportunities for us. So this is definitely something to focus on. Okay, so then when you've found the SDGs that are relevant for your company, you want to set ambitious goals in order to make sure that you take action on the SDGs. My first tip would be to set goals according to your impacts, just as Caitlin also referred to in her in her presentation. So look at where you need to minimize your negative impacts most crucially, and also where you can best increase your positive impacts. But also bear in mind to look at which goals would make sense from a business perspective. The SDGs provide a really great way to advance sustainability topics in a business-oriented way, and you want to make sure that your goals are in line with your business ambitions in general, so that you're going in the same direction. Because if your goals are not in line with your business ambition, you're not probably going to achieve as much impact or take as much action as you would if they were in line. And always before setting any goals, you want to know where your baseline is. So gather data, analyze it, and see where you are at the moment, and then you're much better equipped to also set goals and see where you need to go. And involve different parts of the organization in the process. So have cross-functional team meetings, do some benchmarking to see what kind of goals your peers have been setting, but also what kind of goals industry leaders have been setting. And then you can kind of see what is a certain good goal that you could then strive to achieve. And be ambitious. I really like this quote that I have here. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the source anywhere, but I think it summarizes this really well. So if you set a goal that you know for certain how you will achieve, versus something that really takes you forward and you know will develop your business in a certain way, and you're not even maybe quite sure how you're going to achieve it when you set it, you're much more likely to achieve more in the end, whether you actually meet the target or not. But do set ambitious goals. Just as Caitlin also pointed out, we need ambitious goals to drive us forward. Then I'm going to be giving a few examples on what we've been doing. And just like Susanna, I'm also going to be concentrating on SDG 12. So for us, SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production is naturally very relevant, as we're a consumer goods company. And we have a commitment to fight against throwaway culture. Our products in general are made to be timeless, and they last for a long time. But from a sustainability perspective, this isn't enough on its own. So we have also set an ambitious target of having a majority of our net sales coming from circular products and services by 2030. This is continuous work in progress for us to strive to achieve this kind of ambitious target. But for sure, this target has accelerated our work and innovation processes towards becoming more circular. And when you have a goal like this, it definitely takes time. It's not something you achieve in a few months. But when you have set that ambitious goal, you're also likely to work for it very much. And here are some examples of some of our achievements so far after setting this target in 2019. This is not all we have achieved, but a few examples. For example, we have the Rantala recycled collection. This collection has some of our most classical and even iconic glassware pieces, but these are made completely from recycled glass. And then we have the Fiskars Renew scissors, which are made from recycled and renewable materials, and they are fully recyclable. They have the same design and same functionality as our classic scissors, but they're made from different raw materials. And then we have the vintage service. This has really been constructed because we want to embrace the timelessness of our products and provide a platform for consumers to enable them to provide another life for their products if they don't need them anymore for one reason or another. And This was initiated in 2019 and it's now available in Finland and Sweden, but we have further plans to expand it also to other countries in the future. So this is basically, we take back tableware from certain brands from our portfolio and we resell them. Okay, so then once you have your SDGs, you have ambitious goals, you want to make sure that you integrate them also to your core business. Communication and engagement, of course, is key. So you want to make sure that everyone knows what you're focusing on and why you're focusing on these things. So keep the targets visible all the time. And I find that the SDGs are actually a really great framework in general for us to remind us on what is important to focus on and where we need to most crucially develop. So they can also be a really great guiding tool for business planning. And what has worked really well for us is, for example, we have this high-level goal for getting the majority of our net sales from circular products and services. So this is a group level goal for us, but then we've left some freedom for our business areas and functions to see what is the best way for them to contribute to this higher level goal in their own way that makes business sense for them as well. So we let them set sub-targets for their own operations to see what would be the best way for them to contribute. And this is because our business areas and our brands, they're different from each other. And some of the brands might be on different levels of the sustainability spectrum, if you will. So it really makes sense because there's no one size fits all solution. So it's best that they look into what is the best way they can contribute. And this could be, for example, one business area or brand deciding to increase the recycled material content in their products. It could mean providing more spare parts to enable repairing products if they needed that. And for a third one, it could be providing more services to elongate the life cycle of our products. And vintage is one example of this, but we have also been piloting this frying pan recoating service where you can bring your old pan to be recoated, and it's basically brand new or even better than new after the recoating process, and so you don't need to buy a new frying pan. So there are different ways for our business areas and brands to contribute, but they're all kind of playing a part in us achieving that bigger goal. And then as my final slide, I have these 3 points for you on how to succeed with SDGs. So the first one is to really focus on prioritization. Look into where the biggest negative and positive impacts lie. The second is to set goals to drive impact as well as business performance. So what is really relevant for your business specifically? And then the third one is to communicate and engage. So make sure that everyone in your company knows what you're working towards and what you're focusing on and why. That was all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juulia. Really great. I think it's really good to approach this topic through real life practical examples. So we do really appreciate you coming here and share how you have taken on this journey at Fiskars Group. I'm sure this will be very valuable for our business audience here on the line. So thank you for this. And maybe if anyone wants to hear more from Fiskars Group, they can reach out to you, Juulia. But at this stage, we will move on to a short Q&A, panel-style Q&A with our speakers. So I invite all speakers to put their camera back on so that we can answer some of the questions that we have gotten from our great audience. We've gotten some questions through the chat. Some of them have been answered already. And we have gotten great questions from registrations already prior to this event. So I will be lifting some of these here now and invite all of you to give your best effort to answer the questions that our participants are wondering. So maybe to kick things off, we have a question that I'm sure many, especially smaller companies, are maybe dealing with and thinking about. We got a question from a company that is internationally operating, but still a small company with under 40 employees, and they were wondering if the implementation of the SDGs is feasible and valuable for them. So they are asking if the SDGs if they are too big of a framework to start with, and are wondering how small companies can make a difference with the limited resources that they have. So this is probably a question that many companies, smaller companies especially, are faced with. I was wondering, maybe Caitlin, you want to kick things off and give your 2 cents on this issue, and maybe the other ones and then chime in.
Yes, I'm happy to. And I think it's a great question. It's one, within the Global Compact, around 60% of the companies participating are small and medium-sized enterprises. And yet so much of our calls to action do still center on the SDGs, because we recognize the important and really critical role that small business can play. First, we know a number of employees. We at the Global Compact often define companies' size by number of employees, but we certainly know that is not necessarily an accurate reflection of impact on the planet, nor the potential scope of your value chain. So just to say, I think that is one important thing that we recognize, is that no matter where you're operating, and then especially as you look down your value chain, you likely would find significant opportunities for impact. The other thing that I would really emphasize is that if you're here, I suspect that you're working to set a sustainability strategy and embed sustainability deeply into the heart of your business, no matter the size. And in that way, then I actually think that the SDGs are a really remarkable tool to provide guidance, or sort of like as a lighthouse or a North Star for you to take inspiration for what are those areas where your business really could, again, regardless of size or sector, find those opportunities to prioritize your efforts and leverage whatever resources, technology, impact you do have towards those areas that are really going to have significant local or global impact.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. Susanna or Juulia, do you want to add anything to Caitlin's answer?
Caitlin really summarized my thoughts very well. The only thing I would maybe add is that there are 17 goals, and there is definitely something for every single company that is relevant, that you find relevant. And just as Caitlin said, I think they're a great kind of guiding framework and tool to see what are the areas that need focusing on and where we should develop. So definitely they are a good framework for any size company.
I agree with that, and just to think about the design perspective, all of the SDGs, if you think about them from your own perspective, they can be quite simple things to optimize or streamline processes, or something similar. So yeah, I agree with what was said.
Great, thank you. Really valuable answers. Moving on to the next one. The first question was more so from a perspective of a smaller company, but we did get a question from a large company as well. And I do know that Juulia already kind of touched upon this in her presentation already, but maybe you have something more to add. Our participant was asking how to support the implementation of best practices that are initiated at the group function to practical level in a large company. So Juulia, maybe you want to start with this, and if you have anything to add in addition to what you already said, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I think the best way to get people involved and integrate is to really make the goals concrete, so that there's something that everyone in the company can understand, and they understand why they are working towards these goals. And if there's a way that they can be made tangible for each employee, that they know how it affects their specific line of work, then that always makes it better. And I think I've liked our approach really much in the sense that we have the higher level goals, but we also give the freedom for the business areas and functions to set targets that really are the best way for them. So they also have the opportunity to bring their own thoughts in and contribute. So I think that's also one way to engage.
Great, thank you, Juulia. Susanna or Caitlin, do you have anything to add, or are we moving on to the next?
I'll just say the one thing I'll add really quickly is that we do recognize the importance of being able to pitch and storytell internally as a tool to bring others along on the journey, especially if they aren't so engaged in yet sustainability, or understand the importance of the SDGs, or even know what the SDGs are, right? So that's a skill that we really do want to support you in building in our programs, so that you as a sustainability professional are equipped to help bring colleagues internally along on that journey as well.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. Good addition. We did get some questions from the chat. I'm gonna take one here directly, since we are now digging into the challenges that different companies are facing. I wanted to lift a question that is coming from a service company. Marie says, our customers often use our services to advance their SDGs. She's asking, what areas would you recommend a company like ours prioritize, as we do not produce physical products, and we have already tried to minimize our own impact at the office, for example, in terms of waste and traveling, etc. So any tips for service-based companies? Maybe Susanna and Caitlin, you have something to share for this question.
Yeah, as an example, was there a more specific description of the service?
SaaS, so that's service as a software as a service company. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. Well, if we think about technology, then the ecosystem is quite big, involving many stakeholders, including clouds and software providers. But that's a difficult question if you're not exactly providing any specific product. But then you have to, I think, look at the wider picture, what is involved in the entire ecosystem that you are involved in.
I think the other thing, through SDG Ambition, we've had a number of service providers participate, and one thing that does typically emerge, even if we go and I don't want to make any assumptions about the company, not knowing them, but we do often find the companies who are in SaaS or service providing firms can benefit from looking at things like gender equality internally, right? Ensuring, well, I won't make any assumptions, but in some parts of the world, it's a bigger issue than others. So perhaps it's not as relevant here, but at least doing that examination internally to be sure you sort of have put in place all of those things internally, and you're not taking for granted that you have sort of tackled gender equality, living wage, some of those other issues before also looking towards how you can support others.
I might
sorry
add
if that is not
something
relevant to the question asker, but it is sort of the most common thing that we see. And then I think the other thing too is how you make your own investment decisions. You know, are you integrating sustainability into those investment decisions? How you spend your capital. All of those types of things are some of the first places you can also look within your own direct operations as well.
Exactly. I might add to my previous comment that the digital services often have a physical negative externality. So things, even though they seem to be only on the screen and in the cloud, they really often have negative externalities that realize somewhere else as physical.
Great, good addition, Susanna. Thank you both for answering that question. We still have time to go over a few more questions. There was a question directly for Juulia. Our participant wanted to know what kind of methodology Fiskars Group has used to measure positive and negative impacts on the SDGs. Do you have, do you want to elaborate on that a bit to give more context?
I'm actually not sure what kind of methodology was used back then. This was in 2018, but now I could use, for example, Upright to see what kind of negative and positive impacts usually the kind of company or service that you provide entails. And then, yeah, I guess there are quite a lot of ways to do this, but maybe that would be a good starting place to see how you look to, like, when compared to your peers, for example. So.
Great, thank you. I was thinking maybe, Caitlin, do you have anything to add here? Any best tips on methodologies on how to measure positive and negative impacts?
There's a few, I mean, there are many tools available, none probably perfect yet in terms of alignment with the SDGs. A few that are really helpful. One, in terms of thinking through a principles-based approach, is the Danish Institute for Human Rights Global Compact self-assessment, which goes, it is very principled, but it sort of takes you through sort of that baseline. That would really be helpful in terms of identifying those negative impacts. And then we also, oh my gosh, I'm sorry that I'm sick and now my brain is not working. Patina, what is the navigator?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
SDG Action Navigator.
Oh yes, the SDG Action Manager. Oh my goodness, please excuse me. Oh my gosh, that was a dark moment for me. The SDG Action Manager is indeed also a pretty comprehensive tool that we developed in collaboration with B Lab. Takes a bit of time to go through it, but it's another one that's more directly tied to the SDGs.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything to add, Susanna, or should we move on to the next? Okay. One thing that I also wanted to highlight, we have been touching upon this slightly in everyone's presentation and now in the answers, but we wanted to dive a bit more deeply into the communication perspective, especially internal communications. We got a question that is the following. Do you have any tips for initiating the talk on sustainability with colleagues who may not have a very clear idea of what sustainability means for the firm or for their own work, when the goal is to get everyone to see the sustainability aspects of their work for themselves? So any tips on how to initiate this discussion and how to help colleagues to kind of find their own, how they are impacting the whole company's effort to advance sustainability. Maybe this is also something that can be approached from a design perspective. So maybe Susanna, you want to kick things off.
This is quite a personal thing. I think you have to have a passion for this, of course. it doesn't exist without passion. And I think it's very important to show your passion to others and get other people excited about the things that you feel excited about. I mean, it's always spreading. Like yesterday, I saw the Upright, Juulia was mentioning Upright presentation. It was super exciting, and she's very like loving her own product and loving the situation, even though it's so challenging. But I think it's being excited about it. The issue is the main thing.
Great, Juulia and Caitlin. Any tips you want to share on internal communications?
I think maybe in a situation like this, it does require one person from the company who is able to translate the SDGs and what they mean for the company. Otherwise, it's too, it might be too vague, but getting to the concrete stuff again, I think is the key.
Great. Do you have anything to add, Caitlin?
I trust Juulia, who I'm sure is herself doing it in action to speak. But yeah, just to say again, we know that there is that element of, storytelling, right, that is likely required too. So trying to paint the picture of where everyone fits in, what your role is, and what that bigger vision that you're trying to work for is. And then we know, very importantly, making sure that person that you're speaking to themselves sees themselves in that picture that you're painting, to build that, sort of personal investment in what you're working towards.
Exactly. Good rounding off. At the end of the day, this is about people who are making change. So let's try to discuss with each other on a people level. We still have 2 more minutes for questions. Let's take the last question that we got directly through the chat. This might be a bit complex to touch upon, but maybe Caitlin, you have something to say to this one. We got a question like this: are there any examples of businesses working to contribute to SDG 16, specifically on peace building and resilience, either directly or indirectly? Yeah, maybe Caitlin, do you have any examples in mind that could...
I think I will, with a caveat that this is not my area of expertise, I will flag that the Global Compact just recently put out a framework for transformational governance that sort of tries to marry some of those really key governance issues with Goal 16 and make it a little bit more practical than we know has been perceived by business since 2015. That said, resilience and peace have, I think, never been more prominent in our minds in Western Europe and North America, unfortunately, as it has been since the war in Ukraine began. And since then, I think we have seen a significant number of examples of ways that companies are contributing sort of acutely to acute needs. But what's much more critical, and what I think we'll begin to see, is that conversation around resiliency, economic regrowth in ways that are more have long-term stability. Topics like that are really emerging within the UN as priorities for the remainder of this year and into 2023. So I think we can expect to begin to see a lot more conversation, even if I don't have a clear example for it now. Just to say, I think you're really spot on identifying this. And my expectation is that resilience especially will begin to be a major topic of conversation within our spheres of work in the coming year.
This is really insightful and helpful. Thank you, Caitlin. And we will make sure to link the SDG 16 business framework afterwards to participants if that's of interest to you. Do you have anything to add, Juulia or Susanna? Great. I think this is now the perfect bridge to moving on to the next item on the agenda. I really want to thank you all speakers for joining us today. Really insightful presentations and great answers to the Q&A. I'm sure all of our audience appreciates your input and your insights. So thank you all for participating today, and hopefully our audience can be in contact with you in the future as well. But now we will move on to the next and final part of the session. We promise that we will give a short overview and to the SDG Ambition Accelerator, which is the capacity building program that the UN Global Compact offers. We do offer it here in Finland and Sweden as well as a joint initiative. So we will give a short overview of what this is about and how you can get involved. And for that, I will invite my colleague Magnus to the stage, and he will give you the overview as well as close this session. So over to you, Magnus.
Thank you so much. Can you see my slides, and can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, perhaps the slides are more important, but hello everyone. Thanks again for attending today's event, and thanks for this very nice Q&A session that we just got to take part of. So my name is Magnus Mellgren, and I work for the Swedish Global Compact Network, and I just wanted to briefly tell you about UN Global Compact's educational program, SDG Ambition, which we have heard about today, and this program is about supporting participating companies to accelerate their work with the SDGs. And today you have of course learned about some of the key steps on how to take action towards the SDGs, and now you might be wondering, so what could be the next steps for your company to take action? So whether your company is only starting out with your journey of the SDGs, or you want to make sure that your current SDG plans are sufficiently ambitious, the SDG Ambition Accelerator is for you. And the purpose of the accelerator is to challenge and support participating company to take action towards the SDGs, while following here the steps that we have seen today, the steps of prioritization, goal setting and integration. So the UN Global Compact is providing this accelerator in partnership with Accenture, SAP and 3M. And the program is delivered then in collaboration with Global Compact local networks around the world, including here today Finland and Sweden. So let's look at the SDG Ambition in a little bit more detail. So the accelerator is a 6-month long virtual program. And it aims then to challenge and support participating companies of the UN Global Compact to set ambitious corporate targets and accelerating the integration of the SDGs into their core business. And as part of SDG Ambition, your company will receive knowledge from online live workshops and training sessions, but also guidance and support from subject matter experts, and also peer networking and knowledge sharing with other program participants. And so the Global Compact networks of Sweden and Finland will be delivering the program free of charge and to our UN Global Compact participants in our networks. And we will also run this program collaboratively, meaning that participants in our track will get to network and share experiences with other participants from the Nordic. But digging a little bit further into the details, to just look at the overall structure of the program, the accelerator is divided into 3 modules, which goes over roughly 6 months. And the modules all include online educational courses to build robust knowledge, as well as facilitated workshops online that are supported by our partner Accenture. And these workshops are then to put knowledge into practice. And I know that some here are participating from previous accelerators that are watching here today, and there will be some revamping on this accelerator. So there will be also content that is relevant for alumni, which we will be communicating about more going forward. But that's nice to know. But in the first module, participating companies will then define priorities based on what is relevant in terms of their business impact. And then they will then set an ambitious goal that is aligned with SDG ambition benchmark that Caitlin presented earlier today, and the related SDGs that apply to that benchmark. And in the second module, companies will build pathways and set out actions that will be needed to achieve their goal. And they will then also construct a business case to support their sustainability ambition. And in the final third module, companies will develop supporting metrics for their goals and also identify key technologies and capabilities that will be needed to implement their goal. And just roughly for the timeline of the program, the registration closes on 30th of September, and the official program kickoff is expected to be somewhere around mid-October. And the program will then run roughly over 6 months until around April next year. Just briefly about what we ask from each company that signs up. We ask for you to register 3 people. The first 2 are 2 company representatives who will be actively taking part of all the program activities. Ideally, these are 1 representative from the sustainability strategy department and 1 could be a systems and technology professional. The time commitment for these 2 representatives will be around 50 hours in total per representative. And the third person that we want to be registered is an SDG champion. And this is a person that has direct line of communication to the top management of the company. And it's also a person that can follow the SDG, the program developments, and support the representatives. And the overall commitment for this person is only a few hours throughout the program. But very good for you to know if you're interested. Tomorrow, UN Global Compact will host an informational session about SDG ambition, and where you will also get to ask your questions. And it will take place tomorrow at 3 o'clock Swedish time or 4 Finnish time. And you have the link here, and we will also be posting the link after today, or you will receive it probably in the chat in a bit, and we will also send it after today's event. But last then, the accelerators is open and free of charge to all companies that participate in our networks, and we hope to see many of you signing up by September the 30th at the latest. And if you're not a participating company yet, do reach out and learn how you can benefit from the world's largest sustainability initiative, and also contact us if you're interested in SDG ambition. And for our international participants, you can also go to unglobalcompact.org/SDG ambition to see if the program runs in your country. But we're now coming to an end of today, and thank you all for joining, and thanks to our excellent speakers here today. We hope that you have been learning some new things on how to take action, and also while hearing them from these inspiring stories that we have taken part of today. And with that, I wish you all a very nice day and a nice week ahead. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.